Hey, welcome to Flight Test. I'm Josh, and today we're going to be showing you how to build the mini F-22. Now, if you haven't seen the mini F-22, it is featured alongside of Peter Schriepel's brand new design, the FT Mini Vector. This model will work off the F-Pack if you want lots of power, but also if you have the A-Pack, which is the small 1806 for indoor flying or small backyards. As always, we have free plans and free build videos, which you're watching right now, but if you want, you can also support us for getting the speed build kit. Let's go ahead and get our materials and get started. Before we start on our airframe, there's going to be two things you're going to want to do. The first is going to be to build your mini power pod. The mini power pod link will be located in the links below if you've never built one. Now, the mini power pod can be transferred from one plane to another for the most part. There are some things like thrust angles that have been changed on some of the other models, but a good way to find out on which way the firewall should mount is always look to where the A points to, and that is going to be the side that you're going to want to mount your firewall on. Now, you can swap these power pods out. The flight characteristics may change ever so slightly because of thrust angle or downward thrust angle. The other thing you're going to want to do is to center your servos and install the servo arms onto them. For this, we're using the 5-gram ES9051 servos that are included with your A-Pack or your F-Pack. In this portion of the build, we're going to show you how to build the main fuselage of the mini F-22. To build the fuselage, we're going to need these 4 simple pieces. As most of our builds, we're going to go ahead and remove the foam cavities, and we can do that by taking a gift card and dragging it down through to the bottom of the paper. You can also do this set with a razor blade. Just make sure that you don't cut all the way through the paper. 180-degree fold, and the cavities will pop out right in your hand. So once you've removed all your cavities, your fuselage should look just like this. Our next step will be to remove the paper on this area here. Now, if you're familiar with building the F-22, this is going to be very, very similar, except a lot of these pieces are actually separate. This is small enough where we're able to incorporate all in one sheet, so you have a lot less gluing. Now that we have all the paper and the cavities removed, we're going to glue down our doublers for the nose. This is going to do two things. It's going to give us more strength and make wrapping the nose even easier. I'm using the AdTech Pro 200. This is available in our Crafty kit or sold separately. It's a glue gun that will last on very big airframes and it won't cool down quickly. Going to repeat the same process on the other side. If you're scratch building this, there's going to be a legend and a key explaining it. Dan Sponholz did an amazing job drawing our plans. He's been drawing the last, oh my goodness, probably 7 plans for us. He's also going to be working backwards. But he did a really good job creating legends that make things self-explanatory. But black will be cut through, red will be score cut, and blue will be an indicator line or a crease. Now that our doublers are thoroughly dried, we're going to go ahead and do a B-fold. Now, B-fold is exactly what it looks like in this drawing right here that's etched into the foam board kit. Our side cheeks are going to be beside the bottom plate. So B, beside. If it was an A, it would be above, just like what you did on your mini power pod. So for a proper B joint, we're going to focus most of our glue on the side of the bottom plate. That's so when this folds up 90 degrees, most of the glue is going to go where it matters, not against the paper. So I'm going to start about 1/4 inch from the one edge, and I'm going to end about 1/4 inch from the other. This will keep the glue from squirting out and gluing it to the table. I'm going to fold this up 90 degrees. It's always a good idea if you have a square handy to always keep this nice and square. Once this is dry, we're going to repeat the exact same process on the other side. Once again, I'm ending about 1/4 inch from the edge that I want to stop at. Same thing as before, pushing down against the table, rotating 90 degrees, and then using the square to make sure I'm nice and perpendicular. Now that the glue is thoroughly dried on the bottom of our fuselage, we're going to put our attention towards the top. Once again, this is another B-fold, but we're going to do both side plates at the same time. So to do this, we're going to focus our glue on the side of the bottom plate here, and on the side of the bottom plate here. Now you're going to notice it's a little bit muddy looking. That's because I used the gift card to do this. If you use the razor technique, it'll come out very clean. Either way is just fine. You'll never see it. Just make sure that there's plenty of material cleaned away, so when this fits down, it's nice and square. So I'm going to go ahead and favor my glue 1/4 inch from one end, stop 1/4 inch from the other. Same thing on the other side. Now, I'm going to go ahead and flip this 180 degrees. And I'm going to allow this area, matter of fact, I'm just going to have to go over here. I'm going to allow this area to hang over the table. Using the table as our friend, We're going to push down nice and hard against the table and make sure it's nice and square. It's really important to always check for square on the front and the back, and also the middle. Always check this while you're holding your glue joint. If you do this in the air and don't use the table as your friend, you're going to get a glue joint, but most likely it's going to be rounder and not as square and not look as good. Now that the back of our fuselage is sealed up, we're going to put our attention towards the nose. Now we haven't put any glue on here, so I'm going to go ahead and crack this 180 degrees. I'm going to take my fingers and I'm going to form the nose and put a little bit of curl ahead of time, just so we're not fighting it. I want to make this, when I drop this down in, it's nice and soft and curls to it. I don't have to force it because this is going to be very hot in this area. Put a little bit more curl right at the front edge. There we are. This is ready for glue now. We're not going to try to do this in one step. We're going to open this up. We're going to put a bead of glue here, here, and then also on the paper. So it's going to be glued in 2 spots on the nose. We're only going to go up to this section. We're going to do this section second. So I got plenty of glue in my glue gun. Nice healthy bead on the very bottom here. Another nice healthy bead right here. Last, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start 1/4 inch and then go all the way to the tip. 1/4 inch in, all the way to the tip. Be careful so you don't burn yourself. I'm going to lightly roll this down. I'm going to really get this established with my fingers first. You can use the table to roll this, but you're going to want to make sure that you keep a constant motion going back and forth, because if you hold in one area, the other area is going to pop out. Give this an extra 30 seconds to dry because we're going to be pushing directly against this. The bottom portion of the nose is complete. We're going to go ahead and put our attention towards the top portion. Now for that, we're going to do the exact same process as before. We're going to kind of establish a very light curve. We're going to fold the top plate over top of the bottom plate. No real A or B fold, just in order here. And we're going to fold this around, and we're going to make sure that we're happy with the fit from the tip of the nose all the way back to the canopy. If you're scratch building this may be a little excessively long. Go ahead and trim it before trying to glue it down so you don't bring in any damage. That looks really good. So once we're happy with the fit, same process as before. We're going to put a healthy amount of glue on the inside of the doublers. We're also going to put it across the very front of the nose here, give that nice bit of strength, and then also along the paper. Once again, be careful, hot glue is hot. This is a really good project. These little mini jets are really good projects for kids to build with families. And also in middle school and high school, they can fly slow and fast and they take a beating. So all I'm looking for is to make sure that the edge of the nose is nice and tight and looks just the way we want. If you're not happy with it, go ahead and mold it now while the glue is drying. The last piece to go into our fuselage before it's complete and we're ready to move on to the canopy is going to be this doubler for the motor mount in the back. Now before we glue this in, we're going to go ahead and remove the paper on both sides. It sounds kind of funny, but what we want is we want the motor mount to sit just literally a millimeter or so higher than what it's currently set at, because we want the barbecues to pass through it and put pressure pulling it into the motor mount. You're going to see what I'm talking about later, but go ahead and pull off both sides of the paper and we're going to place that down in here. You're going to see a little etch line right here. That's going to be the indicator of where that mounts. Alright, so we're going to glue this down in. And this is not structural, it's just nothing but a spacer, just to give us the proper thrust line that we want. Smush this down, because I don't want a lot of buildup. And even when we put our barbecue skewers through here, we're actually going to be kind of angling up and then picking it, pushing it down. Reason being is I just want this really, really tight up against the frame. So don't be afraid to kind of smush this down and make it really tight. At this point, our fuselage is done and we're ready to move on to the canopy. In this portion of the build, we're going to show you how to build the canopy and install a little pull tab and test fit it into the fuselage. To build our canopy, we're going to use these two pieces here. We're going to have our main canopy section and also our top cover. You're going to notice compared to the old F-22, we're not using poster board anymore. We're going to bend the foam because it bends so well. First thing we're going to do is remove the cavities here, here, and then here and here. I'm going to use a razor blade, but you can go ahead and use a gift card or a thin piece of plastic. I'm making sure we don't cut down through the foam into the paper. Alright, 180 degree bend. Fold it right out. Now we're also going to go ahead and remove our foam from this portion here. Make sure this comes off in a nice clean section. This area here is going to be reinforced to overlap the exposed portion on the fuselage. While we're at it, we're going to also remove the paper so we can give ourselves our bend that we want. Alright, so let's put our attention towards the main part of the canopy. This is going to be an A-fold, which means the side cheeks go above the bottom plate. Here's your bottom plate, here's your side cheeks, A for above. So we're going to focus most of our glue right on this portion right here so we have the strongest joint possible. Alright, with the glue down, we're going to leave the side cheek onto the table. We're going to bend the bottom plate up to 90 degrees, and we're going to use our square to make sure that we're nice and perpendicular to the table. Hold it for about 30 seconds and then repeat the same process on the other side. After this is thoroughly dry, you're going to notice that this channel that's made is the exact thickness we need to fit our top piece in. Now this piece is longer than what we need, so we're going to have a little bit of excess we're going to leave on the top and the bottom. We're going to trim this and fold this in just a moment. So don't worry about trying to line up one edge. Just go ahead and split it right down the middle or get as close as possible. I'm going to go ahead and put right where we actually fitted it a nice bead of glue. If it goes over a little bit, don't worry. We're going to fit this down right on the top here. I'm going to give it about 15 seconds, and every 15 seconds I'm going to go ahead and swap ends, making sure that's nice and flat pressed against the former of the canopy. Once our paper is completely down and we have a nice gap-free surface here, I'm going to lay this against the table and take a razor blade and just go through the foam surface here. I want to make sure that this portion here is nice and flush with the very front of the canopy. So if you have to retrim it, it's okay. I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of glue here, a little bit down here. So we always say we're going to use the table as our friend. I'm simply going to take this, rotate 90 degrees, and hold it for about 30 seconds. After that 30 seconds is complete, I can take a nice sharp razor blade and I can trim the excess that we don't want. I'm going to come up and put my attention right to where this point is here. I'm going to trim it out. Same process on this side. Here's the point of the canopy. Trim it out. Now, depending on how you scratch build and how you cut the pieces, I want you guys to have plenty of room to make sure this is fit just the way you want it. That's why this isn't exact and you got to trim it to spec. It's also going to help your skills for scratch building. Same process on the back. I'm going to score this down, fold it, peel it off the paper. If I have any extra glue residue, you can just fleck that off. Glue all around, and then push it down. Give it a good 30 seconds, and trim off the excess just like we did on the front side. This last step isn't necessary. You're going to notice I grabbed a scrap piece of foam board. I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of glue reinforcement on this paper just to make sure it lasts a very long time. For that, we're going to need a scrap piece of foam board, or if you want to do it on your work table, you can. And we're going to want another scrap piece here. I'm just going to rip this off. I'm going to go ahead and try to do this so you guys can see easily. I'm going to go ahead and take my hot glue and put a nice bead right down in the seam. Notice I put it in the seam, but now I'm going to come back and I'm going to squeeze it, just like doing a reinforced hinge. I'm going to squeeze it right off. I'm just going to slowly roll this down as I squeegee it off. You can see why I didn't want to go ahead and do this on the build table. What this is going to do, it's going to completely coat that paper. It's going to make it very durable. It's also going to very securely bond it to the canopy frame. I'm going to repeat the exact same process on the other side. You can use this technique on a lot of different things to reinforce your paper and make it even stronger. Now that our canopy is all finished, we want to test fit it into our fuselage, make sure there's no adjustments, but this should be a very snug fit, so before I do, I'm going to put a little pull tab on the back of the canopy. Now, if you have a little piece of Scotch tape, tear off about 2 inches, inch and a half, 6 centimeters. We're going to fold over this top little centimeter or 3/8 of an inch to make a little tiny pull tab, just like that. The higher of the two sides of the canopy is the rear surface. We're going to let that pull tab exist just above, so that way it doesn't get any dirt, and we're going to fold this down and below. That's going to give us a nice strong pull and be very inconspicuous. So to install the canopy, I'm going to start right about in the middle. As I mentioned before, it's nice and snug. I'm going to move this all the way to the front. I'm going to press it down into place. At this point, your canopy is done and we're ready to move on to the wing. In this portion of the build, we're going to show you how to build your main wing section, cut your hinge lines for your elevons, reinforce, and also get your vertical side reinforcements done. If you're building the mini F-22 off of the speed build kit, you're going to go ahead and have an extra step here. We're going to need to reinforce this glue area here where it was folded in the kit. The main pieces we're going to need to build our wings is going to be the main wing section. You're going to notice that the elevons are already fastened. We're just going to need to do a bevel for that shortly. And then also our little side reinforcement plates. Just as we did before, let's go ahead and remove the cavities before we glue and reinforce this area. Now, keeping a piece of scrap foam board handy, we're going to open up the nose section and put a thin bead of glue right down in the cavity. We're going to follow up with a little piece of scrap foam board just to finish off and smear off any excess glue. Ironically, while we're working on the wings, we're actually going to go ahead and dress the elevons. This is going to be the easiest time to do it because everything is nice and flat. Let's go ahead and bend the elevons 180 degrees from the wing. And I'm going to go ahead and do this. You can do this on the table. I'm going to go ahead and do this close to the camera so you can see it. I'm going to take my razor blade, not at a 90, but at a very acute angle. I'm going to take a nice sharp razor blade and I'm going to drag it down through, keeping my blade just above the paper on the center line. And I can go right through both. Keep in mind my hands are placed far away from the edge of the razor blade. Now, if you don't want to use a razor blade or you have problems with score cuts, practice on a piece of scrap foam board, or you can go down and look at our links below. There's a tip on building without the use of razor blades. We're going to show you how to make a double and a single bevel for both hinge lines and foldovers in that video. Let's make sure that we have nice, easy, bind-free full deflection, and we do. We're going to go back to our having a little scrap piece of foam board handy. I'm going to bury the tip of my hot glue gun right down into where the paper is. Put a very thin bead on both portions. Now I'm going to go along with my scrap piece of foam board and I'm going to scrape that off. What this is doing is giving us a reinforced hinge that'll make this plane last a very long time without delaminating. Water resistant has a better adhesion with the paper, but it doesn't mean that you don't want to go back and reinforce just for longevity. Once your glue is dry, make sure that your elevons move nice and free and that they don't bind. Now it's time to put our attention towards the vertical side reinforcement for the wing. You're going to notice that these two tabs here line up, but we got a little tiny half edge cut. This is going to be where we're going to crease this up. It's going to be marked in red because we actually do a little bit of a score cut just to make that bend a little bit easier. Let's go ahead and test fit it before we glue it. That's perfect. Now we're going to take note on where we're going to need to glue. We're not going to need to glue on the high spots, but the low spots here, and then we're going to focus the remainder of our glue on this portion right here. More glue does not mean more strength. You want to be careful where you put it. So I'm going to go ahead and focus it right down here, little drops, then right up against that paper, stopping about 1/4 inch. Put the tabs in first. Just rock it down. Now we're going to put this right over the top of the paper and then push down against the table. So once this is dry, I'm going to go ahead and go back on the inside just for a little added strength. And I'm going to put a nice thin bead of glue, stopping short where the servo hole is, right along the sides. If you want to, you can follow up with a little piece of scrap foam board, but it's not necessary. Give that about 30 seconds to dry. We're going to do the whole process over again with the other side. Once again, noting that the score cut is facing inside and that we need to give a little bit of a bend. Same process as before. Glue on the lower portions. Drop there. All the way. Little drop there. And a little bit of glue right there. Alright, press it into the tabs. About 90 degrees. Force it just like that. Give us about 30 seconds and I'm going to go back and reinforce it with the hot glue once again. In this portion of the build, we're going to show you how to install your servos, push rods, and control horns. So for installing our servos and our linkages, the first thing we're going to want to do is go ahead and remove the stickers, so we're not gluing the stickers to the airframe, but the servo. Next, we're going to want to go ahead and scuff this up. I'm just going to carefully use a razor blade. Just put a couple groove marks in here. Just give the glue something to bite into on that fatty plastic. Now we're going to tip this under. This isn't going to push through this direction. It's going to actually tip under and just be revealed like this. This is sized for a 5-gram servo. If you have a bigger servo, you can use it, but you're going to want to have to open up this cavity here for it to fit through properly. So we're going to put a really nice little drop of glue right in the middle. And we're going to make sure that we push down on this and spread this glue out as thin as possible. So we're going to hook this under. We're going to wiggle this back and forth and seat it nice and firmly right up against the bottom plate of the wing. Once this is dried, I'm going to follow up with a little bit of glue on the very top here, just to make sure it stays locked in. We're going to repeat the exact same process on the other side. I already pre-centered these, so if you haven't centered these up, we do have a link down below that'll help you with centering up your servos. A little tiny drop of glue. I think we're going to have this whole entire build done with one glue stick. Smushing it around, kind of sliding it back and forth. There we are. We're making sure that the wings of the servo push right up against the side plates. And follow up with a little bit of glue. These are the stock push rods that come with our speedboat kits and that you can also buy separately at our store. The one thing you're going to notice here is the pre-bent Z-bend. I want this to be able to be reconfigured in the field, and rather than unscrewing these servo horns that we have nicely centered, I'm going to go ahead and take my pliers, I'm going to grip them, and I'm going to turn them 90 degrees. This here is what we call a modified Z-bend. Now take the Z-bend behind the hole and flip it up. The reason we want to do this and have this on the outside is I want this to be as close as possible for the push rod reinforcement plates to go over top. Go ahead and do the exact same process on the other side. So I want my push rod end to face up, so I'm going to grab this here, 90 degrees, that way it's bending up. There we are. And pop that through. Our next step is to get our push rod guides ready. I'm going to go ahead and take our barbecue skewer. I'm just going to take a couple swipes over this, creating a nice open cavity for our push rods to travel through. Let me do the other side here while I'm at it. You're going to notice that the angle of this has been made so this can pass right through here. And then you're going to see a little tiny bump right here. But we can actually move this back and forth to get different height based on how we need it on the control horns and the servos that you use on the push rods. So we're not going to glue this down quite yet because we want to make sure that we get this just perfect. So we're going to go ahead and just leave it as we see right here. We're now going to go to our control horn. We're going to press it in place. And with the scrap piece of foam or just the remainder piece, we're going to lift this up, just giving just a little bit of up trim or reflex into the tail. We now have the position we need for our Z-bend, so I'm going to mark this with my fingernail. And since I haven't glued this, I can lift this up and grab it with my pliers right at the edge of my nail. Bend it in 90 degrees. Reach about a millimeter or so in, then bend it straight up. I'm going to go ahead and grab a pair of pliers. Once again, thank you, Kevin Teschner. I've been using these for over 2 years. Kevin Teschner gave these to me back when I used to use Chad's wire cutters, and they haven't failed since. I'll rock this into place. So let's go ahead and seat down one last time, make sure we're happy with all the fit, and that looks great. Our desire is to get that hole as close to the hinge line as possible. If you have to move it by a millimeter or so just to get the perfect amount of reflex, that's just fine. So we'll lift this up. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to dress this wire guide. I'm going to keep my glue far away from the push rods on both sides. We'll go the same distance in, all the way at the bottom, just like that. Last step will be to put a little drop inside the control horn slot. With the right amount of reflex, we're just going to push that control horn right in and let it dry. Once it's thoroughly dry, you can follow up with a little drop on each side if you're worried about the strength. Then go back and let it dry for another minute. One side is done, we're going to do the next, but we need this gauge, so I'm going to go ahead and replace it with a little scrap piece of foam board. We'll do the exact same process again. We're going to lay that foam board right on the hinge line on the back, give us just a touch of reflex. We already have this opened up, we're going to slide it in. Insert our control horn. Find out exactly where we want to be. Their wire. 90 degrees in, millimeter in, 90 degrees up. Slide the control board on. Let's get this going the right direction here. Make sure we're happy with the amount of reflex and the position of everything. We'll lift this up. Be at the very, very far side of one and the very, very far side of the other. See it down in place, push it in. All right, last step is we're gonna flip up our control horn. We're gonna lock this down. Anytime you're working with control horns, give it a good solid minute to dry. Go back and reinforce if needed. In this portion of the build, we're going to be showing you how to install the nose onto the main wing section. To do this, we're going to go ahead and test fit it before we glue it down. We're going to focus on the very top notch to get that in first into the surface of the wing. Once that notch is all the way back, we should be able to rotate this and lock it down. You're going to notice that you're going to have about a 1/4 inch space on the very back here. That's okay, that's where the motor's riding partially. Let's go ahead and put in some glue. All of our glue is going to be focused on the lowest point. It's going to be right here. And the exact same on the other side. Same process as before. We're going to start the fuselage, go down to the notch, push the notch in, rotate back, and push down. What you can even do, so once again, take this to the edge of the table, canopy hanging over, and then press down. We're going to make sure that this isn't bent in any way while we're holding it down against the table. We're going to go back and reinforce with glue here and here. We're going to squeegee the excess out and push the rest into the crack. Same process as before. We're going to go ahead and put a nice thin bead right on the top here and follow up on the other side. Cut a new scrap here. In this portion of the build, we're going to show you how to install the receiver, get the motor spinning the right direction, and also put it in our bottom plate. So for installing the power pod and our receivers and making our connections, we're going to go ahead and flip the plane on its back, keep the nose off the edge of the table just so you don't do any damage to it. And you're going to notice that we haven't put our fins on. That's so we have a nice easy surface to work off of. Now typically our power pods are mounted face up, so the cavity is up against something. In this case, it's going to be the total opposite. We're going to focus our cavity facing down. So we're going to work this. It should be a nice friction fit all the way forward, just like that. We're going to go ahead and take our barbecue skewers, and we're going to pass them through the holes. Now I'm going to focus this barbecue skewer down just a little bit. I really want this to be as tight as possible, and I want to just get on the other side. I'm going to do that on both sides. A little twisting motion also goes a long way. Once I've done that, I can pass it clean through. A little twisting motion. There we are. And we're just going to leave a little tiny bump on each side. So I'm going to push this almost all the way in, leave a couple millimeters out, and clip it on the other side. We're going to repeat the exact same process on the front. Poke it in and down. You're actually going to feel the barbecue skewer kind of wander around the hot glue joint. Now that our power pod is installed, we're going to put our attention towards the servos. Now I already have this bound and I've already assigned elevons on my Raptor radio to talk to my receiver. So I'm going to go ahead and just take a chance here. Our throttle is port number 1. We're going to go ahead and plug into port number 2. And just on any receiver, a good practice is always look where the minus is. That's your ground. Your black or your brown wire is going to go closest to your ground. So in other words, the orientation you see here is going to transfer from here to here. So throttle, elevon 1, elevon 2. Now we're going to go ahead and just plug these, plug both left and right servo into 1 and 2. We don't have to really worry about which one is which. Now if both of our controls are backwards, in other words the elevons, when you pull back it goes down, and when you push right it gives the left input, then we know that we can simply reverse it on our transmitter to get the right function. But if one function such as elevator goes up, and then we have our aileron control backwards, we're going to go ahead and need to swap these two inputs here and here, and then either it'll be perfect, or then we'll have to go in and reverse it on our transmitter. Let's go and power it up and see what we got. So what we're going to do now is we're going to turn on our transmitter first. Let that power up. And then we're going to power up our unit. Alright, at this point it may flop around. You can use your sub trims to get back in the proper. We'll cover that right before flight. But let's go ahead and give input. I'm going to flip this around. We're going to go ahead and check and make sure our direction is correct. When I pull back on the elevator, the elevons should go up. Perfect. And when I push right on the ailerons, the right elevon should go up. So this is perfect. Now, if both these inputs were backwards, all we need to do is go into our transmitter and reverse them. If one input was backwards, we need to go ahead and go into our receiver channels, swap out number 2 and number 3 on the Raptor, and then either it'll be perfect just like this, or then we go into our transmitter and reverse the channels. Now would be a really good time also to make sure that our throttle's working, and it is. This has a standard thread throttle. We do sell lock nuts. One thing with pushers, if you're running a conventional prop, this could very well loosen on you. You're going to want to make sure when you install your prop that the numbers are facing towards the nose and spin in the proper direction to give us thrust. So everything checks out good here. The motor's spinning in the right direction. Our elevons are good. I'm going to unplug this and I'm going to route my wires. I'm going to go ahead and install my receiver right back here. I'm going to take a little piece of tape. I'm going to go ahead and take my receiver antenna and I'm going to bend it 90 degrees all the way up at the front. Now the foam's not going to block the signal, and this way if I'm flying right at myself I have optimum signal, and as it's flying past you, you only have a chance to hit that dead zone momentarily. Now because this is a pusher prop, I don't want any wires falling back, so I'm going to take my time and I'm going to route this carefully. So my wire goes all the way up to the front so I can make my connection. And I'm going to take a couple pieces of tape and tape this down. I want nothing able to fall back and come in contact with my prop. There we go. At this point we're ready for a bottom plate. To prepare a bottom plate, we're going to go ahead and remove the excess foam on both sides. Now we have a couple different options. If you know you're definitely happy with the way everything is, you can glue this down, or you can simply use some tape and tape it into place. I'd highly recommend just for now that you tape it into place. You can still paint over it, but that way if you ever have to access these servos or the receiver, you have the ability to remove it. So I'm going to go ahead and take this, and I'm going to slide it right underneath these two tabs here. It's going to be the exact same process as before. So this is going to go all the way forward, up against this notch here, and you're going to notice that it sits down beautifully on both sides. Now I can just take two little sections of tape here and here, and it'll make a very nice strong joint. You can tape the whole surface if you want. I find plenty of strength just going here and on the other side. In this portion of the build, we're going to install the fins and also make sure that we have the right amount of reflex into our elevons. To install our vertical stabilizers, we're going to go ahead and first test fit them. And you're going to notice that we have a gauge included in the kit and also on the plans. This gauge is going to go to the outside of the fin, so the fin can rock down towards it. That gives it the classic F-22 look. We're going to go ahead and put our glue on all the lows. Can't believe we're still working off the same glue stick. We're going to fit our fin straight up and down. And then we're going to use our gauge. We're going to put it by the tab so it doesn't glue our gauge to the fin. Then we can follow up with a little scrap piece if we need and scrape off the excess. Give this a good minute to dry and you can always go back and reinforce it. Once you remove the gauge and the fin doesn't move, we can move on to the next side. Same process as before. Gauge on the tab, pull it down. Scrape off the excess. Now that the fins are dry, we're going to go ahead and put the proper amount of reflex into the elevons. Let's go ahead and power up our transmitter and plug in our airframe. Just like in our little mini arrow, we have a little tiny reflex gauge with a very slight angle at the very bottom. To check for the proper amount of reflex, we're going to go ahead and put the flat part of our gauge on the wing and let the raised part of our gauge come up and meet the elevons. If you have to make an adjustment, go into your sub-trim menu and adjust your elevons up or down to make it meet the gauge. In this section of the build, we're going to go ahead and install our prop and then move our battery around to find the proper CG. We're going to make sure that the numbers of our prop are pointing forward. Now you could have an 1806, which would probably run a 6.3 prop. This is a 6045 prop that couples with the F-Pack or a 2204 motor. Now, the numbers are here. They need to go towards the nose. If you had this backwards, yes, it would still induce thrust, but you'd have a lot higher amperage draw, a lot more noise, and very little power. So numbers are going forward. Now, if you have a conventional prop, you're going to want to probably invest in an extra lock nut, because if you hit the ground and it spins your nut loose, you're going to lose it because of the torque. Let's put our spacer in here. There we go. Those spacers are really important to make sure it centers perfectly. They're precision. Let's go and take our pliers and tighten this down. Now that our prop is installed, we're going to go ahead and use the battery to get the proper CG. Now I'm running an 800 milliamp 3-cell. Some people's batteries are lighter or heavier. What I found with this battery, if you're getting it with the electronics pack, I'm going to slip this down, and it's a nice friction fit, so I don't even worry about Velcro. It's going to be almost all the way at the very back here. You may even be touching it right here, depending on the type of flying that you do. So let's go ahead, and on the very bottom, you're going to see two little dots. We're going to place our fingers on these little dots, and what we want to see is a slight nose down. This plane can actually fly severely nose down, but this is the optimal position if you want to fly a little bit of nose high and fly slow. Alright, so our next step is to get ready for the Maiden. I'm going to go ahead and turn on my transmitter, plug in my battery, and install my canopy, and we'll go outside. Alright, so we're ready to Maiden. One thing you probably didn't notice in this video is that we didn't talk about control throws. Generally, we go extreme on all of our throws because we want really extreme performance. We do dial in, however, 30% expo. But now, if you've never Maiden a plane before, you're nervous, go back to our videos, check out the 6 quick tips for a successful first flight. We're always going to point into the wind. And speaking of wind, we got a lot of it. It seems like every time we fly these F-22s, we don't have calm weather. But it's spring, what would you expect? All right, so let's give it about half throttle and throw it in the air. All right, so there's my half throttle. Let's have some fun. So what the F-22 is really good for is long, smooth lines, a little bit of high alpha, but if you're looking for high alpha, Peter's Vector is amazing. Let's go vertical here. Well, wind's good to have fun with. Friends, I want to thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of the Flight Test family. Don't hesitate to download the plans. This is a really easy build, fun to do, fun to combat. And if you want to, buy the speedboat kit, make a memory. We'll see you next time.